Hello everybody, welcome to Documentary Film Editing Masterclass Week 3. Really exciting. We're going to be moving along from our assembly edit to a fine cut. So I'm really pleased to continue moving along as we go through this documentary process. So thanks again for joining us. This is, again, week 3 of 4. If you missed any of the prior sessions, you can rewatch them. So you're watching this right now, your digital ticket link has weeks 1, 2, 3, and 4. So you can go back if you missed the previous weeks, and then we hope you'll join us for next week as we finish wrapping up documentary editing. The great thing is your ticket will give you these links. They're all archived on Vimeo, so you can rewatch them. And then by the end of the month, we post everything as well on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. So that will be up there as well. But since you're joining us first, you have that exclusive first access. So take advantage, rewatch, enjoy, and see where, your documentary film editing can take you. So, our goal is to take us from, taking that footage in that you've shot as a filmmaker, as an interviewer, grabbing all that footage, bringing it in, and making a story out of it. And that's really the fun part is, the editing of documentaries is such a crucial step, more than perhaps other genres like narrative, where there's a script and you can reshape it to a degree, but it's been written and you're just kind of rewriting it in the editing as well. But documentaries really find their story through the editing and those and figure a lot of things out. So it's a real exciting process. And it can take a long time. And the more you do it, the more you practice this editing of documentaries, you'll get a lot faster and be able to move along with things in a really quick way. So that's the goal here is we got footage in, we did an assembly edit with the interviews, and now we're happy with what we have. And now we're going to start to fine tune it and look at adding some B-roll and get to a good point. And then by next week, we're going to totally finish the picture editing of the documentary film. Probably put like a song and see what, kind of music and just see where we are from there. And then, that'll end our documentary process. So just want to thank all our partners in making this project happen. So we have the Canada Council for the Arts, and we have our library partners as well. So we have our library partners are the Blue Mountains Public Library, Collingwood Public Library, Wasaga Beach Public Library. Now, I want to mention that all of the libraries have our digital arts computer workstations. So what we're using, the software here, is DaVinci Resolve Studio, version 17, and those are all loaded on the digital arts computers. So what are digital arts computers, you may be asking? These are iMacs that have like 32 gigs of RAM or more, fast processing. They have solid state drives or RAID drives, so they can handle 4K video. So it's designed for video editing. So those computer stations for the digital arts are at the libraries. So once libraries are open again, you can book time and then access that facility and our computers. So the Creator Space computers are there for you to use. So you might be following along at home, maybe you have a laptop, and you can work in different resolutions, but you're like, hey, I want to shoot in 4K or use one of the cameras we have in the Loans equipment. So we got you covered with that. So just remember that's going to be available in the coming weeks as well. So the digital arts workstation. So everything we're demoing here, you can then book some time on a computer and work on DaVinci Resolve Studio, the full software version there. Otherwise, if you're at home, you have a laptop, you have a desktop that can handle some video, we say usually about 16 gigs of RAM. Remember, you can download Blackmagic DaVinci Resolve, the free version, for no charge. Download it, use it, edit, and you can do everything we're doing as well. The studio just unlocks some additional features that are kind of more in the higher resolutions and really sound specific and visual effects specific areas. So generally, it's a pretty solid piece of software, even on the free side. So take advantage of that for sure. So what are we doing today? So we're gonna essentially look at the next steps in documentary editing. What does that mean? So I like to say here, like with that assembly edit done that we did last week, the next steps are to work, you're working towards a rough cut. and a fine cut for the interviews. And finally, to begin adding B-roll. Now, remember, A-roll is our interview or our main footage. It doesn't necessarily have to be an interview. It could be a reenactment, for a documentary film. But our A-roll is that typically the interview footage, and B-roll is the footage we put on top of it to help visually tell that story further. So, if someone's talking about a specific type of flower, you'd want to have a shot of that type of flower and put it on there. You might have to source this. So there's, in documentary filmmaking, there's a situation where you might have to get stock photos, videos, stock elements. Personally, in documentary editing, I end up using a lot of stock music, whether it's temp, even just for the editorial, to get the mood, the tempo, and things like that. So stock is really important. Image research is important, depending on the historical complexity of the story you're telling. You might need to go that far with it. So at first, again, I always recommend get working on something that is familiar and to you, accessible to you, before you move into these kind of larger realms, because image sourcing and copyright and research and stuff can get very complicated. So you want to make sure you're, doing the right things and getting the right permissions and things. So it's a lot easier if you start with something that's really familiar with you. You can, a story, your own story, or a local story, working on a film like that, and then you can move along and get things done without getting bogged down in the concepts of complex image research and clearances and things like that. So anyway, so let's continue on here in terms of what we're gonna do and so on. So I'm just gonna escape out of this and go right into Blackmagic DaVinci Resolve. So here we go. So here's what we had last week. So we basically have our assembly edit. So what I always like to do is remember that we have our cuts. So assembly edit 1. So what I like to do right away is make sure I make a copy. So I right click, duplicate timeline, and there's the copy right there. So I'm going to call this rough cut 1. And today's session, we're probably going to get through kind of a couple stages that you might not necessarily do as quickly as we're doing. Again, this is very short film for demo purposes, but this might be something that you work on for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. So we're trying to compress the processes. I'm not in any way saying this is something you do in half an hour. I'm just showing that, okay, we have about 3 minutes. I think we had 3 minutes of total assembly edited footage, and now we're gonna take it down a little bit more in our rough cut. So I'm just gonna double click, make sure that my rough cut 1 is the one that's open, and I'm just gonna zoom in here a little bit into the timeline. What I like to do is I'm gonna move it down just a touch, so it's not right at the beginning, but I have kind of a little bit of black frames footage. Let's say about 5 seconds. Let's just stop there, and then it's going to start. So that way I can put maybe some B-roll in the beginning, set the mood, so I don't just start right away with the interview. So I'm kind of preparing myself for that. So let's start watching.
They think it's something they've seen before. It could be the house they were brought up, or their grandparents' place, but it's never the actual house, but something in their mind resonates with their memories. So
So I'm going to go right up to something in their mind resonates with their memories.
Resonates with their memories.
So I'm just going to take the trim tool and just trim it there.
In their mind, resonates with their memories.
That's nice. And I'm going to actually leave that space. So I like to trim, and it gives me some pauses. So it's not just like talk, but I have a little bit of a pause. Some natural pauses. So I like to see how that flows organically first.
Just to be curious about things around you. That's I learned from my parents taking photos because they carry their camera all the time wherever they went. So sometimes they're just nothing important or nothing beautiful, but the fact that they always carry their camera around, because you never know what you find. So that's why I use it as a mantra now. Wherever I go, whenever I go out, I always carry my camera.
That's nice. So I'm just going to trim a little bit just at the end there. I really like that whole piece too. So that's nice.
I tend to follow a certain style of editing because I don't want to look all the same as other photographers. So I just try to bring a uniqueness to my photos. That's why a lot of people think they might be paintings because I make them look like paintings. So that's just the style I'm interested in right now. They might be paintings because I make them look like paintings. So
I'm going to go, I make them look like paintings. I'm just going to end right there.
I make them look like paintings. Might be paintings because I make them look like paintings.
And I'm just going to click on that. And then what I'm going to use is just the arrow key here. And I'm just going to trim a few frames over. These keys right here, these arrow keys, not those arrow keys. A little bit different on this smaller keyboard. Okay, so there we go. So let's just see what that looks like.
They might be paintings because I make them look like paintings. So
okay, I'm just going to get rid of that. So
they might be paintings because I make them look like paintings.
That's pretty good. Okay, now next part.
I wouldn't call myself a pro photographer. I'm semi-pro. I always liked photography. I was surrounded. My parents were into photography. They were always taking photos of things around them and taking shots of me as a child. So there were always cameras around, and I started taking photos when I was much younger and just kept shooting. And it's still, I'm shooting all the time. So there's no timeline where I thought I'd be pro or semi-pro. It's just a continuation of my hobby. So I still consider it as a hobby because I enjoy it. It's still, I'm shooting all the time. So there's no.
So I'm going to start all the way back here. I don't think I need the beating part because it's kind of a repetition of about the parents earlier.
So there's no.
Kind of like right from there. There's no. You know, just in terms of kind of the what's his plan here.
There's no. There's no timeline where I thought I'd be pro or semi-pro. It's just a continuation of my hobby. So I still consider it as a hobby because I enjoy it. Hobby because I enjoy it.
That's nice. So what I'm doing is I'm just basically I leave the cursor kind of where I want to end, and then I just trim, just click on the ends, and then I just trim with the mouse and just snap to that cursor. It's a really fast way I find to, you know, kind of navigate through here and edit through the timeline of what I need to do.
What I learned about my photography, it keeps changing. It's a very living thing. Even though I look at the old photos I took before, there's always something that can change or that can improve. That's the beauty of digital photography. You can always go back to old images and enhance or try different styles. So that's an ongoing process. I never let the old photos stay the way they were. So I'm always revisiting the photos.
So here I'm going to take kind of two pieces. I like the beginning.
What I learned about my photography, it keeps changing. It's a very living thing.
Very living thing. So now I'm going to use this razor tool here, and I'm just going to click on it there. And then I'm going to just go back to the cursor. I'm just going to move that beginning part there. And then I think I want some of this later part here.
Improve. That's the beauty of change, or that can improve.
And kind of come back to, that's the beauty of digital photography. I'm just going to put those together. So extract a little bit of the middle.
It keeps changing. It's a very living thing. That's the beauty of digital photography. You can always go back to old images and enhance or try different styles. So that's an ongoing process. I never let the old photos stay the way they were. So I'm always revisiting the photos that I took.
Actually, that would be interesting.
So I'm always revising.
I'm always revisiting. So I'm going to just end there. And then here's our last part. So you can see we're down to just 2 minutes. So we've taken off about a minute, which is great. So that's a really good kind of rough cut.
There's no mistake in photography. There's no bad.
And this is kind of, there's a tendency sometimes as editors to get rid of these moments where the subject is maybe pondering. But I think this kind of, it's a great moment where he's just kind of thinking about the question and also this, finale statement we have. And it's kind of neat to do it that way, where you can, bring it in that manner where, he's just pondering for a moment and thinking about, what happened, and what this kind of the profound statement he's really going to make now. So I like this moment where he's just thinking.
There's no mistake in photography. There's no bad photography. You just have to be true to what you want to take photos of. Just find the passion, find the things that you want to photograph, and just stick with it. What you want to take photos of.
So I'm going to go there, and then I think there's a little here.
Just find
And then I want to go to find the passion. And I know it's a little bit, there's a kind of a stumble there, but I think that it's pretty natural. So I just want to get rid of that little bit of the and and I'm just using the razor blade, just cutting, and then we can even just delete it out. So I can go like this and just hit delete, right? And then I can just, and it leaves a little bit of the black space again that I like sometimes, but I think I want to suck those together, just stick them right next to each other.
Take photos of. Find the passion. And
maybe we'll have a little bit of a pause there.
Find the passion.
So here's kind of the trick too. So now we're down to 2 minutes from 3 minutes. So here's the trick too. What I always like to think about is if I extract a little piece of it and there's a little bit of a black space, then I know I've done some editing. It gives me two things. It gives me pauses for tempo. So the person's talking, but it doesn't sound like I'm, clipping together these, different sound bites from all over the place. It starts to sound natural because we usually have a moment. We don't just talk. We have a moment where we pause, we think, and that. So keeping those natural breaks works. So what I like to do is, as I'm just trimming things out, I keep those breaks in there. So there's little black spots here. So you can see here, like these little spots. It's not all together, like, a bunch when we were just doing the assembly edit here. But there's these little pauses, like, a second or so, like these little black spots here. I'm just going to zoom in on that timeline a bit more. But see, like, you get this little pause here. You get this little pause here. And that's just for my trimming. So rather than just sticking it all together, I'm looking at like, well, maybe there's a bit of a pause. Maybe there's a nice moment there where we can just let them pause. And, and that's okay. And we can do it that way. So I really like to see where it takes us organically. And it's, and again, different processes. I'm just really outlining how I like to approach this. So let's just start. Let's watch this back now.
They think it's something they've seen before. It could be the house they were brought up, or their grandparents' place, but it's never the actual house, but something in their mind. resonates with their memories. Just to be curious about things around you. That's I learned from my parents taking photos because they carry their camera all the time wherever they went. So sometimes they're just nothing important or nothing beautiful, but the fact that they always carry their camera around, because you never know what you find. So that's why I use it as a mantra now. Wherever I go, whenever I go out, I always carry my camera. I tend to follow a certain style of editing because I don't want to look all the same as other photographers. So I just try to bring a uniqueness to my photos. That's why a lot of people think they might be paintings because I make them look like paintings. There's no timeline where I thought I'd be pro or semi-pro. It's just a continuation of my hobby. So I still consider it as a hobby because I enjoy it. Yeah. What I learned about my photography, it keeps changing. It's a very living thing. That's the beauty of digital photography. You can always go back to old images and enhance or try different styles. So that's an ongoing process. I never let the old photos stay the way they were. So I'm always revisiting. There's no mistake in photography. There's no bad photography. You just have to be true to what you want to take photos of. Find the passion, find the things that you want to photograph and just stick with it. Yeah.
Cool. That's very, very nice. I like where that is. So we're at, we've taken off about 45 seconds, 2 minutes, 21 seconds now. So that's pretty good. So that, again, this is a really short sequence. So imagine if this were, 3 hours. This kind of process would be over a week, 2 weeks, right? So we're just compressing what's done. So that would be the rough cut. And I'd say, okay, I like where this rough cut's going. That's pretty nice. So, at the rough cut stage, I still like to just then go into a fine cut of the interview, like the A-roll, before I start putting in the B-roll. Now, you might not want to do that. You might want to start putting in some B-roll at this point. And then I'll tell you why the difference here. So the one option is that sometimes you need the B-roll to kind of think about the tempo and the pacing of what's being said and what you have and how it's going to work. And then you might decide, okay, like that kind of sound bite's too long, too short, and so on by starting to put the B-roll. So there's that, that's one path. And I think it really depends on the type of film, the documentary film that you're working on. So some films will be very specific to that B-roll and the stock footage and, the supplementary B-roll that you're putting with the interview. And then some films will be more, so this I consider like an artist profile documentary. And so in this case, I find like I really want to get that voice clean to where I want it and then have the B-roll come in because, I still think there's one or two clips that might be a little bit long. I want to just get it like kind of under 2 minutes. And that's kind of my goal. So, I'd like to get that happening first and then put the B-roll in. And then there's going to be a couple stages of fine cuts, like, to do one, do the B-roll and kind of keep going from there. So that's the school of thought there. So it's do you start adding some B-roll and then yes, you can. Or as an editor, you can say, you know what, I want to really perfect the voice of this interview first and fine tune it from rough cut to fine cut and then start adding some B-roll. So that's what you have to consider. It's like what's going to work better for you. And you might not know right away. So in that case, I suggest, well, you can do both ways. You can say, okay, well, let's start putting in some B-roll and that's great. And then you might say, oh, you know what, that really worked and I can trim down a little bit. But the other thing is I find that with more experience, I like to really fine tune the sound bites a little bit more, like one more pass. So kind of get into what I call a fine cut, A-roll fine cut, before I get into the fine cut with B-roll. And again, so the fine cut is trying to tighten things up, not have extraneous ahs, or interview or asking questions, so you don't want to hear like the director's voice. So you're trying to get rid of all of that kind of stuff, and so it's a nice, clean, presentable edit of picture. So let's move along here. So if I, so what I'm going to do now is make again duplicate it. So I'm going to right click, duplicate timeline, and now I'm going to go into fine cut one. Right? And then I'm not putting the date, but I would also suggest putting a date. So you specifically know that, okay, it's June, whatever, 2021, and that's, when you made this. That way, as you go along, that there's, the fine cut one was today, fine cut two was 2 days from now, fine cut three was another day after that. So you kind of get an idea of where things are going and what day. Because then you might go back and say, well, 2 days ago I kind of liked where that cut was, so I'm going to go back and watch a specific part. So the date is that little bit of extra kind of metadata that you can add in there too. So fine cut one plus the date, I would recommend too. So remember, we're going to double click so we get our fine cut opening up here. So I'm now working with that. Want to make sure he's working with the right sequence, right? Okay, so let's watch this again, and we'll do a little bit of fine tuning now if there's anything that is a little too long or too short.
They think it's something they've seen before. It could be the house they were brought up, or their grandparents' place. But
And here I'm going to just get rid of that ah. I don't think it's necessary, and we'll just clean it up. And so I just did a razor blade, and I'm just going to bring this forward and connect it.
Or their grandparents' place.
See, that's already nice. The not missing. It's not really doing anything, so let's get rid of it.
Were brought up, or their grandparents' place, but it's never the actual house, but something in their mind resonates with their memories.
Great. So I really like that.
Just to be curious about things around you. That's I learned from my parents taking photos, because they carry their camera all the time where they went.
So I just want to go there because I think there's a bunch in here in the middle that I don't really need.
So sometimes they're just nothing important or nothing beautiful, but the fact that they always carry their camera around, because you never know what you find. So that's why
I want to go there because you never know what you're going to find.
Because you always carry their camera around.
Right, so I'll just get rid of that middle part basically. Right, so we'll just drag the other piece right over there.
Camera all the time wherever they went, because you never know what you find. So that's why I use it as a mantra now. Wherever I go, whenever I go, I'll always carry my camera.
Okay, and then we'll get to the next clip.
I tend to follow a certain style of editing because I don't want to look all the same as other photographers. So I just try to bring a uniqueness to my photos. That's why a lot of people think they might be paintings, because I make them look like paintings.
Great, that one's pretty good. So just again, leaving a little bit of a pause there, the black space. Again, just these little pieces here. I just like to leave a little bit, about a second or so of a beat between his sound bites.
There's no timeline where I thought I'd be pro or semi-pro. It's just a continuation of my hobby. So I still consider it as a hobby because I enjoy it.
I don't think I need this so I'm just going to get rid of that to fine tune it.
there's no timeline where I thought I'd be pro or semi-pro. It's just a continuation of my hobby. So I still consider it as a hobby because I enjoy it.
That's pretty nice. Okay, and let's get this next sound clip and see how that goes.
What I learned about my photography, it keeps changing. It's a very living thing. That's the beauty of digital photography. You can always go back to old images and enhance or try different styles. So that's an ongoing process. I never let the old photos stay the way they were. So I'm always revisiting. What I learned about my photography, it keeps changing. It's a very living.
So I think that's pretty good. And here's just like our ending part.
There's no mistake. That's the beauty of my photography. It keeps changing. It's a very living thing. That's the beauty of digital photography. You can always go back to old images and enhance or try different styles. So that's an ongoing process. I never let the old photos stay the way they were. So I'm always revisiting.
So I'm kind of thinking I want to put this part earlier. So I'm just going to put right after the style.
That's the beauty of digital.
That's the beauty of digital photography. And then put this part after. So I just like to switch these around. And kind of like...
There's no timeline where I thought I'd be pro or semi-pro.
And that kind of goes there. And then we'll end.
Find.
Oops. This Command Z there. So what I want to do is just this one.
Find the path.
This one a little break, right? So there's two ways we can do that. So I can select it, and then I can also just move it with these arrows, left, right, just by clicking them, and it'll move it on the timeline. So that's a really convenient way to move things, like, you know, add a frame or two. So, you know, you can just add a couple frames, just again, so I have a little bit of that, you know, a few frames of a pause there just before he talks again. So that's pretty nice. So now look, we're down to 2 minutes, and I think that's a good kind of length that I'm happy with. So we went from 3 minutes, we were able to take 1/3, 33% away from this and from our assembly to a fine cut. And that's very typical, 33 or more percent, 50% sometimes. You're really fine tuning and getting it. Our assembly was, again, pretty, it wasn't as loose as it necessarily would usually be on something longer. So again, it could have been, you know, even longer than that. So I'm just looking at where we were. Yeah, 3 and 2 seconds. Rough cut, we got down to 221. Fine cut, we're down to 203. So that's pretty nice in terms of the lengths and stuff. Okay, so let's watch that back, and then we're gonna look at the adding some B-roll now that we have our fine cut. So let's give this a view.
They think it's something they've seen before. It could be the house they were brought up or their grandparents' place, but it's never the actual house. But something in their mind, resonates with their memories. Just to be curious about things around you. That's I learned from my parents taking photos, because they carry their camera all the time wherever they went, because you never know what you find. So that's why I use it as a mantra now. Wherever I go, whenever I go out, I always carry my camera. I tend to follow a certain style of editing because I don't want to look all the same as other photographers. So I just try to bring a uniqueness to my photos. That's why a lot of people think they might be paintings, because I make them look like paintings. That's the beauty of digital photography. You can always go back to old images and enhance or try different styles. So that's an ongoing process. I never let the old photos stay the way they were. So I'm always revisiting. There's no timeline where I thought I'd be pro or semi-pro. It's just a continuation of my hobby. So I still consider it as a hobby because I enjoy it. Yeah. There's no mistake in photography. There's no bad photography. You just have to be true to what you want to take photos of. Find the passion, the, find the things that you want to photograph and just stick with it. Yeah.
Perfect. That's great. I find what's interesting too. So I've used this footage, and we've had this in different master classes for the documentary production, a couple other editing workshops as well. And I find this is the beauty of documentary film editing is that you end up. I don't think any of the edits that I've put together to demonstrate are the same. Using different sound bites, recutting it differently. So even myself doing this several times and over the last year in different workshops using the same footage, it's really interesting how the different that the same editor you will find different pieces. So it's going to evolve, and that's what time is, the luxury of documentary film editing. The more time you have, the more you can, work with the footage, watch it, let it, breathe for a bit, and so on. Generally, you don't have that much time, so it's a struggle. But the more time you have, you can really, make things, find the extraordinary or find the gems in the story that to tell it. So that's I thought a really interesting observation, just a self-reflection here of how each edit that I do is always a little bit different and fine-tuned, and we end up with a bit of a different film each time. So, and that's the amazing thing with any kind of editing, documentary, narrative, especially documentaries, that you can always find different sound bites and different moments that you'll like in interviews, and it can change with you as you get older. Over time, it will change as well. So it's a really interesting genre to work in editorially, that it's kind of breathing, just like when Kita talks about that, it's breathing and always changing. The documentary film world is a little bit like that too, and I find that quite fascinating that it could be like that. Okay, so we have a bit of the B-roll. He's working with some camera stuff, and then I think we have some pieces of his too. So it's kind of interesting. So I'm gonna maybe start with this one. So what I'll do now is I'm gonna right click, say add a track, and now I'm gonna create video 2. So that's the key here, is that we have our A roll on track 1, and then I start to put B roll up here on track 2. So it's on top of it. This is sometimes also referred to as clip and cover in documentary or factual editing. And so basically the sound clips or bites, and then you're covering it with B-roll. So what I'm going to do on the timeline, I'll just remember that we can do, like, I'm going to do an I and an O to mark kind of where I want it on the timeline. So I'm going to go I, and you can see it grades it out. And I want to go
Their grandparents' place, but it's never the.
I'm thinking up to like there, where it's never the. So I want to take that photo, and then what I'll do is, so it's the 3-point thing. So I have, the beginning of the thing, the photo is there, in out on the timeline. So I'm saying let's go right there. So now I'm going to overwrite, and oh, it's a photo. So I actually have to roll it out a little bit to where I want
Their
it.
grandparents' place, but it's never the.
Okay, so now let's have a look at this.
They think it's something they've seen before. It could be the house they were brought up, or their grandparents' place, but it's never the actual house. But some
Okay, so what I'm going to do is you can see he's a little bit underneath it. So just here in the transform, what I'm going to do is just, let's just make this like the full screen. So we just have to kind of transform it a bit.
they think it's something they've seen before. It could be the house they were brought up or their grandparents' place, but it's never the actual house. But something in their mind resonates with their memories.
Okay, so that's cool. Resonates with their memories. So then let's get a shot of. He's gonna start talking about his parents a bit, and then the camera. So let's get a shot of Kita maybe like taking some pictures. Just find kind of you can kind of roll through these and see what we think. So that's cool. So in and out, and I kind of like that we can see that, you know, image of what he's taking. And so I'm going to turn the audio off because we just want the B-roll here. So I'm just going to overwrite that and play it back now.
The actual house, but something in their mind resonates with their memories. Just to be curious about things around you. That's I learned from my parents taking photos because they carry their camera all the time wherever they went because you never know what you find. So that's why I use it as a mantra now. They carry their camera.
Okay, so let's try and get maybe something with him kind of carrying the camera everywhere. That's even nicer. So it's always great that you might find something better in the B-roll. So I'm just going to put that shot there. Now I kind of want something over here, like carrying his camera everywhere. Maybe more of one of these. It's kind of fun. So I'll just put like that there.
Because you never know what you find. So that's why I use it as a mantra now. Wherever I go, whenever I go out, I always carry my camera.
Okay, I always carry my camera. So let's see, what else can we... It's kind of interesting. So it just kind of turns around to the camera.
Whenever I go, I always carry my camera. I tend to follow a certain style of editing.
I'm just going to kind of move this a little bit earlier here. Just a few frames earlier.
I tend to follow a certain style of editing because I don't want to look all the same as other photographers. So I just try to bring a uniqueness to my photos. That's why a lot of people think they might be painting.
And here, they might be painting. So I want to try and use this one because I find this one really looks kind of like a painting.
Beauty of digital photography, you can always go back to old images and enhance or try different.
And then so here I'm just going to do that a little bit of the zoom in again. So I just, you know, drop that in there, overwrite the shot in there. So we're just getting that B-roll.
A lot of people.
And I'm thinking right when he says it looks like a painting, I want to cut to the photo that looks like a painting.
Think they might be paintings because I make them look like paintings. That's the beauty of digital photography. You can always go back to old images and enhance or try different styles. So that's an ongoing process. I never let the old.
Kind of want to hold on that other photo for a bit longer.
And enhance or try different styles. So that's an ongoing process. The war. So it's always, I'm always revisiting.
That's great. Let's put another like shot there.
There's no timeline where I thought I'll be pro or semi-pro. It's just a continuation of my hobby. So it's, I still consider it as a hobby.
And then maybe another shot of him. It's kind of fun. It looks like into the camera.
Because I enjoy it. As a hobby. Because I enjoy it. As a hobby.
So kind of like that. I'm just going to move it down a few frames here.
Because I enjoy it. There's no mistake in photography. There's no bad photography. You just have to be true to what you want to take photos of. Find the passion, find the things that you want to photograph and just stick with it.
Okay, and then here, want to photograph. And what I'm going to do is put the last one or this one here and just kind of have that lingering photo there. Again, I'm just going to zoom in here so we fill the whole frame so we don't see his interview underneath.
Take photos of. Find the passion, find the things that you want to photograph and just stick with it. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, so there we go. So we have we got our B-roll in here. And let's just watch that back one more time here, and then we'll wrap it up and continue next week.
They think it's something they've seen before. It could be the house they were brought up or their grandparents' place, but it's never the actual house, but something in their mind resonates with their memories. Just to be curious about things around you, that's I learned from my parents taking photos because they carry their camera all the time wherever they went because you never know what you find. So that's why I use it as a mantra now. Wherever I go, whenever I go out, I always carry my camera. I tend to follow a certain style of editing because I don't want to look all the same as other photographers. So I just try to bring a uniqueness to my photos. That's why a lot of people think they might be paintings because I make them look like paintings. That's the beauty of digital photography. You can always go back to old images and enhance or try different styles. So that's an ongoing process. I never let the old photos stay the way they were. So I'm always revisiting. There's no timeline where I thought I'll be pro or semi-pro. It's just a continuation of my hobby. So I still consider it as a hobby because I enjoy it. Yeah. There's no mistake in photography. There's no bad photography. You just have to be true to what you want to take photos of. Find the passion, find the things that you want to photograph and just stick with it. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. So I think that's quite a nice fine cut. So that's where we'd want to be. So assembly, we had about 3 minutes and a bit, down to 2 minutes. Fine tune it. Get rid of any kind of ums we don't want. Resequence if we need to a little bit with the story, just to make sure it always makes sense. And brief doesn't hurt it. Brevity is good for the documentary. You want to keep people engaged and the key points being said. And then, once again, I said there's kind of two paths. Sometimes, in an earlier fine cut or in a rough cut, you might start to add some B-roll to see how it's flowing. I like to get to that fine cut, just really get rid of any extra little pieces that I don't want in the A-roll or the interview, and then put in some B-roll. And now it's kind of timing itself out. We zoomed in a little bit on the B-roll just with the on the transform on the video by clicking on the inspector tab and on the video mode. So that's just over here on this side. There's the inspector tab, and you can use the zoom mode. So we just kind of zoomed in a little bit to fill the photos to the full 16:9 of the screen. So that's the other thing too. We'll talk a little bit about that, the source footage, and how to deal with different things sometimes. But we got some B-roll in, we got some shots, and so that's it. That's up to our fine cut. And then next week we're going to look at getting those the next kind of fine cut. We'll call it fine cut 2. We're going to move into like a picture lock. So totally locking everything, saying this is the locked picture. And then we'll put a little bit of music, maybe some sound effects, just kind of to see how it is. And then we would go into like sound mixing. Great news is, next for July, we have a whole sound mixing for narrative film, but it's really the same process. So it's just sound mixing for film, really, if you think of it that way. So I hope you can join me. That'll be in Thursdays in July. So do sign up for that, and we'll be doing sound mixing. And that will apply to narrative film or documentary film, really, and how that process is going to work. So we'll have a 4-week workshop just on sound editing and mixing. So really get in depth on that process as well. Okay, so that's it for this week. Thanks again for joining me. Really want to. Thank you guys for keeping me busy, and I have some really good questions I've been getting. So keep emailing me, tom@tbmcs.ca if you have any questions about editing, documentary, film editing, anything about this workshop, software, technical, any kind of questions. Please do send me an email, and I'd be happy to get back to you as soon as I can. Want to thank all our partners in this project. So we have, again, the Canada Council for the Arts and our library partners, Blue Mountains Public Library, Collingwood Public Library, Wasaga Beach Public Library. Don't forget that the digital arts computers will be available soon. And each library has 2 stations, all ready to go for video editing with Blackmagic DaVinci Resolve Studio. So you can be editing your documentaries right there, or you can download the software for free and use it on your own computers or laptop. So until next week, have a great rest of the day, and I'll see everybody next Thursday. Take care.